My name is Sheldon Gooch, and I'm the curatorial assistant here at the Contemporary Art Museum, St. Louis. And tonight we welcome you to the museum as we show support of World AIDS Day through Day Without Art Enduring Care. In response to the worsening AIDS crisis and coinciding with the second annual World AIDS Day in 1989, Day Without Art was first organized by Visual AIDS to send a call to arts organizations and institutions for mourning and action regarding the ongoing AIDS crisis. Over the years, more than 800 organizations, museums, and galleries across the U.S. have responded by shrouding artworks and replacing them with information about HIV and safer sex, locking their doors and producing exhibitions, programs, readings, and performances. Since 2010, Visual AIDS has been commissioning and distributing thematic video programs to art institutions, schools, and AIDS organizations. This year's program is entitled Enduring Care and features 7 short films highlighting strategies of community care within the ongoing HIV epidemic to disrupt the assumption that an epidemic can be solved with pharmaceuticals alone and recasting community care as a lasting form of medicine. This year, in bringing more attention to these issues as they particularly relate to St. Louis, CAM is pairing the screening with a panel discussion on collective care, mutual aid, and solidarity around HIV. Organizing such a program necessitates creative collaboration. With that said, I would like to thank the following people and organizations for their help in making today possible. Thank you to our community partners tabling this evening over here on the stage of the performance space. Thank you to the St. Louis Department of Health, Planned Parenthood of the St. Louis region in Southwest Missouri, Project ARC, and What Would an HIV Doula Do? Thank you to Tom Brackman and the stewards of the St. Louis AIDS Memorial Quilt, fellow organizing committee members Molly Pearson, Crystal Ellis, and Michelle December, our marketing and media partners, Rebecca Davis, Eddie Silva, St. Louis Public Radio, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Riverfront Times, as well as our panelists, Miyonnee Hickman, Montrelle Day, Charles Ryan Long, and Molly Pearson, who stepped in last minute in place of Lois Conley from the Griot Museum of Black History, who could unfortunately not make it this evening. Last but not least, special thanks again to Project ARC for their generous support of this program. With that all said, I would like to now call up sexuality educator, cultural critic, and CAM Junior Board member Crystal Ellis to speak about our organizing partners, What Would an HIV Doula Do, and introduce our panelists this evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. My name is, again, Crystal Ellis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a sexuality educator, writer, and public health professional, and I'm here tonight as a member of the CAM Junior Board. I would first like to uplift the What Would an HIV Doula Do collective. They are a community of people joined in response to the ongoing AIDS crisis. They understand a doula as someone who holds space during times of transition. They recognize HIV as a series of transitions that begins long before being tested and continues after treatment and beyond. We know that since no one gets HIV alone, no one should have to deal with HIV alone. We doula ourselves, each other, institutions, and culture. Foundational to the process is first asking questions. The collective consists of writers, artists, educators, social workers, activists, and more. They were founded in New York City, but COVID has expanded how they engage digitally, reaching across the US with members also in Canada and Germany. I've had the pleasure of working closely with the CAM team to make this event happen tonight, and it's so exciting to be here with you all. And also want to highlight that 2 of our panelists now are a part of the collective. And at the table in the lobby, we have the copies of some of their print materials for you to peruse, including With Art with HIV, which features 2 interviews with the evening panelists. HIV is often flattened in mainstream discourse. On one hand, it's framed as being behind us, as a part of history. When it is discussed contemporarily, it's predominantly discussed as a biomedical, physical health issue. While HIV/AIDS is absolutely a part of our history, it's part of our living history. AIDS is not over. And while it is a biomedical issue, it is also a cultural, relational, and political issue. Many media outlets proclaim this year as the 40th anniversary of HIV because on June 5th, which is also my birthday, 1981, the first news coverage of a so-called gay cancer appeared in the New York Times. However, we now know, based on testing of saved tissue samples, the first known AIDS-related death was right here in St. Louis. His name was Robert Rayford, a 16-year-old black teenage boy. He lived on Del Mar Boulevard, just outside of the downtown area, and about 10 miles from where Michael Brown was killed 45 years later in Ferguson. When we flatten the way we talk about HIV/AIDS, we miss the ways that our oppression is intertwined and insidious. And we also miss the radical joy, love, and care that so many communities create to not just survive, but to endure the oppressive systems that are supposed to be providing care. This evening with the panelists and these films is a gift, and we're going to peel back the layers together. I'm going to introduce these lovely panelists, and we're going to jump right in and get started with the panel. Montrelle Day is the Senior Outreach Specialist at the Community Wellness Project. Thank you. Charles Ryan Long is a Chicago-based multidisciplinary artist, activist, and Black liberationist. He explores issues of representation, legacy, and loss through papermaking, print, performance, and other mediums that lend themselves to the principles of the democratic multiple. His work seeks out the audience and hopes to stir within them a push towards the future where we center the needs of those with the least among us. Thank you, Charles, and he's our moderator today as well. Miyonnee Hickman is the Community Wellness Project's Transgender Women Intervention Specialist and has been living and working in the St. Louis metro transgender community since 2011. She's been working with the Community Wellness Project for about 2 years to engage the trans community regarding HIV/AIDS and is certified to conduct HIV/AIDS testing and STI screening in both Missouri and Illinois regions. She's a certified community health worker, peer navigator, and PrEP educator. She's been actively involved with the Moho Justice Coalition as an advocate for sex workers in addressing the issues of sex trafficking and the unfair treatment that sex workers receive in the criminal justice system. She is a well-known speaker and has been a part of many published articles, including The State of the Hustle by Moho Justice Coalition and the ACLU of Missouri, the Riverfront Times, University of Missouri St. Louis, and Out in STL magazine. She has also served as a trainer for CWP's NIH project on financial literacy programming, specifically for the trans community and other LGBTQIA+ communities. Thank you, Miyonnee. And last but certainly not least, Molly Pearson. Molly, any pronouns, is a writer, educator, and organizer from Lincoln, Nebraska, now based in St. Louis, Missouri. She works with universities, nonprofits, and cultural institutions to engage in critical dialogue on sexuality, culture, and systems. Molly has been deeply involved in local and state-based efforts to decriminalize HIV and sex work, and is a member of the What Would a HIV Doula Do collective. She is also a professor at the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University in St. Louis, and she implores us all to listen to our elders. Right. You can likely find her at home dancing to disco records with her cat at her feet. All right, thank you so much, and we'll get this started.
Is everybody doing okay? Great, thank you. We're not alone in here. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Charles Ryan Long, and I'm very excited to be having this conversation today and excited that you all came out to join us, to be a part of it. I'm just gonna read off some questions, and we'll go on a little journey and find ourselves wherever we find ourselves when we get there. And then we'll open it up at the end for y'all to ask some questions if you have any at the end. Does that sound okay? Lots of shaking heads. Thank you. I'm gonna start with the first question. I think, all of these are really prefaced on the idea about, some of them are around the films that we're gonna see right after this that have been commissioned and come from voices from around the world. And so, but firstly, I wanna start with Miyonnee and ask, the question of who's at the table gets magnified when drug companies, public health, and AIDS service organizations develop and promote safer sex ads and educational materials. Media that reinforces anti-blackness, further stigmatizes transgender people, or completely ignores rural communities. In your 10 plus years now of experience, how have you seen HIV-related media change in your lifetime? Second part. Wait a minute. And what would you like to see differently when HIV and STIs are a topic of conversation?
In the media, what I've seen change with HIV ads and stuff like that, well, one, it's a lot more of it. Two, they're starting to become inclusive to everyone. I still feel like we could have more transgender voices in the mix, but they are starting to become more inclusive. One thing that I guess you would say the CDC does is like to lump transgender women or transgender people with MSMs. And
what is an MSM for?
MSM, for those who don't know, is men that sleep with men, and that's absolutely not who or what we are, So that is one thing, and then they like to lump us with MSM men, and that's not good. But now the inclusivity of them having more transgender voices in the commercials and ads and stuff like that is a plus. What I think they could do better is have more transgender voices, or I'll just leave it there. More transgender voices in, the ads and stuff like that too, so that we can feel all the way inclusive, not an inclusive but, or, oh, they did but, so that we can just all feel inclusive. And I'll just leave it there, because I will get really deep. So.
And Montrelle, same question.
I don't really need this, but kind of to piggyback off what she's saying, I would like to see in the media more me's. There's not enough masculine men shown in the media, period. And what the media think is masculine, we all know is not masculine. So I feel like if we had more me's in the media, the more guys at the barbershops and more fathers would be able to understand, or even try to understand, the lifestyle. So let's just keep it short too.
Molly, anything you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think mainstream media should be a lot more honest with themselves about really the negligence and the harm that they caused, particularly in the 90s. After effective treatment was finally made available in 1996, there was still mainstream media coverage that emphasized people living with HIV as dangerous. And in researching the history of HIV criminalization here in Missouri, I found one headline in the Washington Post that said, "People with HIV, healthier but more dangerous." And so, but now we have all these romanticized ideals of, marches in the street of predominantly white gay men, and it's like we forgot what mainstream media was doing in the 90s. And so I think really reckoning with that, being really honest with that, and also expanding to piggyback exactly on what Miyonnee and Montrelle were saying, better representation. Mainstream media continues to whitewash and erase people who we know are impacted by HIV, the virus, but also impacted by all the systemic oppression that intertwines with HIV. So I think we need a mainstream media reckoning.
I love a reckoning. So let's continue down that road a little bit. I'm really excited to be here tonight, specifically because of this year being this declared year, 40 years of AIDS, which in and of itself is, to Molly's point, this whitewashing of an epidemic, when we actually know better, right? Which Crystal said some about before in Robert Rayford's case. And so I guess I'm asking us to be a little bit visionary, right? What could a world be like that looked different if AIDS had started here, right? In the Midwest, if AIDS was black from the start, if it involved that image, right, of the people, what would a centering of the identities that y'all just laid out, what would that look like? Because I think what bothers me so much now and how we talk about AIDS is that, and Crystal said this as well, is it's a biomedical intervention, right? People are no longer dangerous to others, and so therefore no longer a threat. But like actually, if someone doesn't have housing and employment or an ability to provide for themselves, you can prescribe them anything. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to be able to take those medications. So I guess if we had gone, let's time travel back, and we have actually focused on the most vulnerable people, what does that world look like? And Molly, I'll start with you, and then we can go back down.
I think that world would look like a world where Robert Rayford was not forgotten. And I think it would be a world where his family was held and treated with care and dignity after it was revealed that he did die of HIV-related issues. That was discovered, air quotes, in 1987, and just 1 year later, the state of Missouri criminalized exposure to HIV. And so I think if we imagine this world that you describe, I think the trajectory of how we have treated people impacted by HIV and living with HIV would be completely different. I don't think Lois Conley, who couldn't be here tonight, who I'm filling in for, I cannot possibly fill her shoes, but she is the founder of the Griot Museum of Black History, and I don't think she would have had to work so hard to create a museum of Black history in St. Louis. I don't think that she would have had to work so hard to bring Robert Rayford's life to the conversation. I'm grateful that she did, but I think that it would be a world of a lot more rest and care and justice.
Either y'all.
So I think it would be, of course it would be a better place, but for me, I know I would still have more friends here if we had that type of world. Because for me to be from a guy from East St. Louis, and if you don't know about East St. Louis, I'm not gonna get into it right now, but just know it's one of those places. And 89 blocks. So if I came in that world, like right now, they know nothing. Nothing. They have most parents don't have those type of emotions because when they came up, AIDS was just a death sentence. So if they knew better, right now to this day, some of their kids would still be here because they wouldn't have committed suicide. They wouldn't have ran away and became sex workers and died in the midst of doing that. So these type of topics are kind of touchy for me. So I'm going to pass it to my sister because we can go all night what that would look like.
And I absolutely agree with Montrelle. It would be much more and Molly as well, it would be much more love. Right, like you said, Robert Rayford's family would have been, loved on and hugged, and it would have been a lot better. And also, I would have much more friends here as well. In my 34 years of living, I've lost at least 50 plus friends. Like 50 is just the number that I can instantly think of that sounds reasonable, and that's horrible for 34, and I would say 90% of them were HIV/AIDS related. And then it actually, like most of those deaths, I don't know why they hit me so hard. I don't know if it was because of who it was or how, but like it hit me so hard to where it literally changed my life. So, and that's hence the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing today, because I just want to save as many lives as possible. And I feel like if they did know back then, it would be a lot better for us.
Yeah, I think for me, like that question and who gets centered and whose stories are told actually really change how our society functions, right? Like if AIDS or the epidemic was a Midwest story, right? And it didn't exist as a coastal or that other place or these people over there, a lot of things would have changed. And I fully am in the camp of many people I love would still be here. If it had been a focus on them and their needs and helping them. But we'll move on. So in Steve Taylor's short film, I Am a Long-Term AIDS Survivor, we will see senior survivors share raw feelings about living with HIV/AIDS on health challenges they face as a reward for living through it. What do you think is still missing from HIV-positive and undetectable equal untransmittable conversations for people who still experience fear of medication side effects and stigma? And Montrelle, I'll start with you.
I believe when we talked about this before, you said what's missing?
Yes.
Well, it starts from the inside, and to me what's missing, it starts within the organizations, like simply organizations that we work for. It's not really, like I said before, implemented until it becomes a deliverable. So it's not really important until funding becomes a part of it. So if we can get like a better infrastructure in the organizations, period, like where the focus is not always money and it's focused on you equal you and getting the message out more, because what I've learned working in the field since 2015, but being out in the community since 2004, I didn't hear a lot of these things until it became a deliverable for me. And I was already in the field, traveling, doing everything. So that's really my big take on it. If we can start with the organizations and start with ourselves and, going to our executive directors and, just simply having that talk with them, like, why is it not important until it's a deliverable, and figure out that problem, then we can focus on the bigger problem.
I also think in that, in our meeting, you also mentioned going into the populations that need it the most, or being in targeting populations that need the most awareness, or need the most help, the areas that most people are afraid to go in, or won't go in.
Molly?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is I think we tend to focus on an HIV diagnosis in and of itself as the tragedy, and we think of the virus as the tragedy. And I guess this isn't really what's missing. I think it's more of like a framing. For a lot of folks, an HIV diagnosis isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is how we systematically oppress people living with HIV and the way that we treat them by design. I think of Joanne Walker, who was a Black woman who was incarcerated with HIV in California. And she worked tirelessly from within prison to organize to get better care and treatment for incarcerated women. And in one piece that she wrote shortly before she died, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said, "I thought the worst day of my life was when I was diagnosed with HIV. The worst day of my life was actually the day I was incarcerated and I was treated the way that I was because of my HIV status, because of my gender, because of my race in the prison system." I mean, people living with HIV can live fabulous lives, long, healthy, wonderful lives, if we change our systems to not only allow that to happen, but to offer unfettered access to exactly that. And so for me, I guess I'm thinking more of framing and less about what's missing.
And also, it's so crazy that you mentioned that. I was actually having a conversation with someone yesterday, and the situation that happened, it happened years ago, but me speaking about it yesterday, it didn't resonate to how messed up it was until now. But I was in a situation where I was at a hotel room with a couple of friends, and the police ended up coming, and literally everyone got locked up except for me. I was the only one in the room that didn't have any warrants. And then I was like, well, my one friend was the first person to get out of jail because she told them she had AIDS. And they were like, oh no, well, we just can't deal with that. We don't know what to do with that. And it's just like, why? You know, like, that is very heartbreaking. I mean, thanks for letting me out, you know, but still it's like, oh, we're gonna dismiss you because you're HIV positive. Like, are you serious? Like, you don't, you know, like, and to me, that's a problem. I think that's really sad and it's really messed up, and I want to curse, but I'm not. So I just wanted to mention that, like, that's really messed up. So yeah.
Thank y'all for that. I think when we were talking, we were having our prep call, because that's what I'm about to talk about, PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is now, when taken correctly, can prevent the transmission of HIV in 90% or something number that I can't remember. But it's highly effective in preventing the spread of HIV from a person. But it's something that you would believe now is universally accessed, right? Everybody's taking this pill and everybody will be safe. And so Montrelle and Miyonnee, I wanted y'all to talk about the realities of whether you see folks engaging in this prevention effort and who it's marketed to.
I'll say being in the health field, being in the HIV field, I always encourage every single client that I deal with to get on PrEP. Now, I can't make you take it or make you get on it, but I will definitely encourage you to do so. For the most part, like, the questions that we ask first is, what do you know about PrEP? Just to see what our clients say. And some of them will say, well, I saw a commercial or I overheard a commercial. But for the most part, they'll say, oh, I heard it was a pill that you take to not get HIV, you know, and then for the most, people just be like, I don't know. I've never heard of it. So it's like, you know, we ask the question first to see where they are, and then we explain it to them. And even the way that I break it down for them, like, if you don't have insurance, that's okay, you know, but they just have a problem with, the biggest issue for me is people having a problem with taking a pill when they don't feel like nothing's wrong with them. Like, I don't have anything, so why am I taking a pill? But it's like, if you're out here, you know, I break it down. If you're out here and you're having lots of sex and stuff like that, then it's good for you. But, like, for the most part, people just don't want to take a pill because they feel like, I don't have anything, so why am I taking this pill every single day?
So with me, I kind of use a trick to get, when I say my people, black people, to take this pill. What I say is, I don't give them the whole, oh, this is PrEP, pre-exposure. They don't want to hear that anyway. You know, I'd be like, you know what birth control is? This is your birth control pill for HIV. And then the guys would be like, oh, for real, man, can you get me on that? Like, help me out, how I'm gonna do that? So that's like my little trick to get them engaged. Because what I've learned is, talking to my people, when we come to get tested, we're nervous, we shaking because we already think we got something. So they don't want to hear the long spiel. So you gotta find a way to shorten the spiel. You gotta find a way to get them kind of. And with the females, it's the same way. It's a little harder with the females versus the males. So I usually just run and get Yanni or one of my female coworkers to come deal with the females. But me, with the males, it's the birth control. I have to literally tell them it's birth, because they didn't know nothing about it. They never heard it. Especially the guys that's coming off, like literally the guys that's in the hood, working the corners, doing the stuff that they do. And they come in with a scare because they don't want to go to the hospital. They don't want nobody to see them. So you really got to tell them this, and they'll get on it. But the process of getting on PrEP is still a long process. You know, so much paperwork. You have to sit there extra 10 minutes to fill out this paperwork. So that's one of the biggest barriers. It's the paperwork and the terminology when you're talking to them. They don't, just from my experience, they don't really want to hear it.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, we think about, a lot of the discussions we've already been having tonight has been about who's centered, right? And so if those folks were actually who those campaigns were marketed at, like, I feel like every time I'm on the internet, like, a PrEP ad comes up just because I watch gay things on YouTube. Like, you know, it's just like, I don't, like, this is not even relevant. Like, why? This is, like, poor marketing. And also, the people in these campaigns, I'm like, are these the people that actually need this intervention? Are these the same people? And so I think it's really true what you're saying, and what we see is that actually these ads and all of this marketing, this money, these resources are actually not centering those who are the most vulnerable.
Like, just imagine if we had Beyonce or Nicki Minaj or LeBron James marketing PrEP. You'll see a bigger change. You know, we'll be walking around. You'll be walking around and they'll be talking about, I got PrEP pills for sale. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, and then the idea, like, right, so, like, black people make up 14% of the US population. However, they make up 50% still of people who are diagnosed with HIV in this country. And so, to that point, like, if those are the people that those folks want to see, why isn't that happening? And I mean, there's probably multiple reasons, but we should look into it, right? Not me, but somebody.
I guess the only thing I would add is age. In St. Louis, most people living with HIV are black men age 50 and over in the St. Louis region, and older folks still get it on, and older folks are still sexual beings, and, you know, with targeted ads, like you're saying, like algorithms, because, like, you know, you're watching the gay shit. I just cursed. I'm not sure if I was supposed to. But, you know, thinking about the digital divide and older adults who maybe aren't necessarily accessing those platforms where a lot of that energy and marketing dollars are going to. And I would also say most aging-related services in the state of Missouri are religiously affiliated. And so a lot of older adults have to go back in the closet. And, you know, PrEP may not be a part of the conversation, particularly, you know, we were talking earlier about what if the HIV conversation started in the Midwest. You know, that provision for older adults might look different.
Thank you for that. Danny Kilbride's The Mercy Model, which is a film we'll see after this, is centered around a public health official promoting harm reduction in 1980s Liverpool through the first needle exchange program by essentially keeping the HIV virus out of the drug-injecting population. Excuse me. This program foregrounded public safety without imposing shame or control over people who use drugs. Montrelle and Miyonnee, are there programs now that you would say that directly deal with stigma for folks who are positive or folks who are drug users, or here in Missouri that you're seeing? Stigma.
If it is, I don't know any. I don't know any. No, not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I know of either. For the most part, the Community Wellness Project, we have harm reduction training, and we're certified, you know, to administer needles and stuff like that, only in the Illinois area. But we don't. Like, there's nothing that we've had this training for what, a year or two now?
Community health?
Yeah, no, not the community health,
Harm
reduction training, and like I don't think that we've actually utilized it. Like I haven't had a client that injects drugs, so I can't say, but we've never utilized or know of any places.
Yeah, I think the tide is turning in Missouri. So we got a big reform to our HIV-specific criminal law this year, which is a huge success. The law is still on the books, but it's just harder to prosecute. But the same sponsor of that HIV modernization legislation has also been sponsoring needle exchange legislation for years. It was all set to pass this last legislative session, but then because of procedure and time, we ran out of time at the end of the session. But this year, it's basically set up to pass. And so once that is legalized in the state of Missouri, I think that that's going to be a really exciting opportunity, and we'll see what happens.
Shout out the first safe injection site within the U.S. being open this week in New York. Just saying, look it up. And works works such as Catherine Chier's Voices at the Gate and Cristobal Guerra's Nobleza de Sangre, we will see how people living with HIV engage in the poetic arts as a form of both political and cathartic expression. What role have you seen the visual and performing arts play in cultivating community and a safe space for people living with HIV in the Midwest? Secondarily, in what ways have the arts been utilized to either call in or call out audiences in relation to the ongoing HIV/AIDS epidemic?
I would say for me, ballroom has been a major factor to where anyone can come and be whoever you want. You can come and have as much fun as you want. It doesn't matter your status. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how you live, as long as you just come to the ball and turn it.
What is a ball for?
A ball is a place where they gather people. It's like we have houses, which are like cliques or gangs, what have you. And look, I'm just being honest. But it's like cliques, and we like all get like famous names of like famous designers, the House of Vuitton, the House of Ebony, the House of Chanel, stuff like that. And we all come together and compete against one another in different categories. I've been a part of ballroom for 13 years. I absolutely love it. And it has just been an outlet for me to express whatever it is that I want to express, like whatever you feel strongest at. I'm a singer, and I've actually sung. I was the first transgender person to ever sing at a ball. And I sung the Star Spangled Banner at a ball that we had here a few years back. But like it was a way for, like, honestly, I could do whatever. I walk a category called realness, drags realness, and I am very well at it. So it was a way for me to get and change from one person. Like, this was before I actually transitioned. I just started doing drag, and so that's, it was a way for me to come out and just be this whole new person. So it was so refreshing. Like, so refreshing to me. And then, like, if you are a runway walker, or if you like to dress really bizarre, they have categories for that. If you like to dress really well, best dressed, like, it's a lot of different categories that you can come out and just be whoever you like. If it's not the person you are, you can be whoever you create. So I think it's, ballroom is definitely one major factor in,
Art as an expression through this thing.
Oh, yeah.
That would definitely be my thing. Ballroom. I've been in the ballroom about the same time she been in ballroom. For me, ballroom is like that outlet. So I know, like, whenever I get mad, I just, I Vogue. So, I can Vogue, I walk runway, and I walk realness. So whenever I get mad and stuff like that, I use that outlet, or I use those people that's in their houses to call and just being able to have that person to vent to, versus not that cousin that's going to judge you and get off the phone and talk to your auntie and tell you, So, but yeah, ballroom really kind of, I won't say it saved me, but in a sense, It really did, and I know that's a huge part that's like played with HIV. Because from here to Chicago, you can't walk into a bar without an organization being there doing HIV testing. If I was to throw a ball, which I plan on next year around March.
You heard it here.
Yeah. So I know for a fact versus me just going out in a week, how many numbers I yield versus me just throwing this one ball with, you know, this certain amount of money. I know I get the out-of-town people, the people that don't come out really in the city will come out, and you get a lot of people that get tested, some new positives, which is not good, but good, because now they getting care.
Knowing is glowing,
Yeah.
honestly.
So,
Molly, any other art interventions you've seen in the St. Louis Midwest arena?
Yeah, so we're sitting in the middle of one, which is exciting. But I just, again, want to lament that Lois Conley could not be here with us tonight. And if we can all mentally send her some roses right now. Her effort to organize the Impact HIV AIDS initiative at the Griot Museum was truly an act of love and deep community care. She gathered public health workers, historians, academics, artists, all kinds of folks to create this truly wonderful exhibition in the lower level of the Griot in early 2020. And it was just stunning, and there was so much programming that was a part of it too. I think one of the most impactful programs that they held was a conversation between Eris Williams, the founder of Williams and Associates here in St. Louis, who years ago, before he got his MPH and started doing public health work, he was in the streets. He was protesting. He was chaining himself to the doors of City Hall. And he, as one part of a demonstration, he put a mirror in a casket to draw attention to the fact that when you look into this casket, you see yourself. Well, then fast forward to the Ferguson uprising, and without any knowledge of Eris's mirror casket, activists here in St. Louis covered a casket in mirrors.
It's in the Smithsonian now.
It is. And carried it down the street. And so, as part of the Griot's exhibition, there was a conversation between the two lead organizers of both mirror casket initiatives, so Eris Williams and Dee Nichols. And just looking at across time, how so many of the issues are the same at their core. So anyway, Lois created that space. And I do know that she has intention to make it an ongoing part of the Griot's program, and program offerings and exhibition plans, but then COVID. So hopefully things will be able to be in the works again, but I just can't emphasize enough what an act of love Lois's work has been for the community.
Thanks for that. I think we're going to open up for questions now, if there are some. If there aren't, I have more. But here we go. Yeah.
Just the address of the Griots. I don't know how many people know where exactly it is.
I don't have the address off the top of my head. I believe it's on St. Louis Avenue. Yeah. Did you find it?
Yeah. Sorry, Google was helpful. 2505 St. Louis Ave, St. Louis. That's pretty. I think we can do it. 2505.
So I don't know this from personal experience, but I was in a meeting with a group of people, and the one gentleman that was there was expressing that we were discussing PrEP, even though he had insurance, the copay was so high that he couldn't really afford to attain it. So I don't know if that's a fact or if this is actually one of the limitations. I know from my own experiences that the copays on meds can prevent me from being able to access the medications.
I think there's somebody in our audience who wants to reply.
So I don't have the exact dates off the top of my head, but there's federal guidance that states that there can't be any cost sharing for people who do have insurance for PrEP labs, the cost of medication, and the visits. However, enforcement of this has not been totally uniform. And people are fighting with their insurance companies to get meds covered that should be $0 to them. I know that there are some organizations that are working on tracking this, but I, again, don't know them off the top of my head, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart because I am just done with insurance companies and the bureaucracy and the pain that it causes people when they're trying to access care. That doesn't address people who don't have insurance, however.
Yeah, me and Crystal were on NPR today at lunch, and Crystal brought up this really relevant space where, true prevention to me would look like both giving people access to the medications they need, but that would also look like access to housing, it would look like access to education, access to employment, and those wraparound services. But if you become a person who is employed, who's living with HIV and make above a certain income level, right? Whereas then now you are responsible, right? Because you've done well, you've done the right thing, and you have a job, you do this whole thing, but now you're responsible for your medications, right? Or a portion of those medications, which to y'all's point can be astronomical at various points. So it traps people in this catch-22 of like, where when I was low income and unable to make these bills, all these things were provided for me, but when I'm making actually not that much, right? Actually still not a livable wage, but just over the threshold, I'm somehow held to the responsibility of taking care of this by myself. And it's a way that we continually set people up, right? In this wave of, generational, generational poverty, but also generational dependence upon systems and spaces. Yeah. Any other questions out there?
It's not so much a question, but a statement. One of your questions was, what would have happened if black and brown people were centered? I'm recalling it this way, so forgive me for paraphrasing. What would have happened if black and brown people were centered at the beginning of this epidemic?
Yes, sir.
And all I can think is tragedy. I don't believe that the United States of America, with her racist history, would have shown up the way that they did for their white boys. So,
I didn't know we were telling the truth.
I absolutely steered away from that. I'm like, I'm not going to be the
Nobody
negative,
told me we were going
I'm
to talk
not
about
gonna
the
be
truth
that
tonight,
person.
guys.
and that has just been with me since you spoke it, and because all I have to lean into is sickle cell, and how that access is so difficult for families, and that is a black quote-unquote problem. So I'm not sure America would have done any better if we would have centered this in the beginning with black and brown people. And I just needed to share that.
And to piggyback off of that, I wanted to originally answer that question with, well, I would hope that they would treat, and love and accept, but I just was like, let's steer away from that because that's gonna open up a whole nother, so thank you, Lawrence.
But I think to that point, we're also, if we forget our histories, like we are doomed to repeat it or doomed to not expect, right? And like, it's important to be clear. I think we have something.
Sorry. Thank you, Lawrence, because I actually just texted Molly and I said, please talk to me afterwards because and I say this with love, have found it very frustrating listening to the conversation because I actually want y'all to say the thing that you're saying you don't want to say because I think this is what, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's been to a lot of these talks like this. and you hear a lot of the same things. But then the thing that I also wonder is how many people who are not living with HIV actually know like the process that people living with HIV go through to get medication, to get care, to get housing. I work at Doorways. Like, until you said the thing about the income level, I feel like if you're not in the field or living with it, you don't know that once you hit 300% of the federal poverty level, you come off. And then also, I don't think a lot of people, even when I was a case manager, clients didn't know, there used to be a loophole where if your job did not give you insurance, the Ryan White system would still pay for your insurance. Around 2015, they stopped that. So therefore, if you're making over that, if you don't have insurance, then you're responsible for it all. And as a case manager, I saw what those premiums were. They're like $400, $500, $600, and you still have copays and stuff. So I'm just saying, and I'm saying if we're talking about HIV care as a community thing, and I'm saying it from love, then I think we need to first start by admitting that it's a very complicated, complex issue that doesn't have very simple, easy answers. It's not just about centering Black and brown people, because you can't do that without also looking at the way the US treats Black and brown people. And as much as you say sickle cell, you can just look at COVID. Because the moment COVID happened, and there was this idea that Black people couldn't get it, and that it was mostly white people, we saw this massive rush to find things like vaccines and care. The moment it started being that it's mostly Black and brown people dying from COVID, it starts retreating. It's not that big of an issue. We have to talk about more like trying to get people, can you wear your mask and stuff. So I'm just saying, like, the things are complicated. And I feel like so much of these conversations gloss over that. And then especially on a day like today, I mean, like, personally, I think it sucks that I know I think about HIV every day because that's where I work. I know my clients, some of them think about it a lot because that's what they live with. But I also know that all my friends who don't work in it, all my friends who don't live with it, barely think about it. I invited them all to this. Not one of them came. But if they invite me to a play or something about some stupid topic, they get pissed if I don't go. So I actually, in some ways, I miss how angry people were in the 90s. Because I feel like complacency is killing so many people in so many ways. Very slowly for some, very fast for others. So I would just encourage y'all, whenever y'all are in these positions in the future, don't be afraid to be that person saying, like, no, this shit is fucked up. This shit is complicated. There is negative shit to this stuff. That doesn't mean living with HIV makes you a negative person or something. You're actually talking about the entire issue. And if people cannot understand, if something's complicated, easy answers are not gonna fix it. It's gonna make you feel better. You're gonna get to go home and be like, yeah, that's great. But guess what? It's still gonna be fucked up tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, in so many ways, like, yeah, thank you first for that invitation. And, you know, I was the moderator today, and you should check my resume. So just to say about, like, in terms of, like, this is very mild for me, and not, you know, mild in the way of, like, you know, I love you, mean it, but making y'all uncomfortable is not actually, I don't give a fuck about that. You know, go home, be uncomfortable, because to your point, there are people who are going home and living with this virus every day. I think me and Molly, our friend Ted, who's also, and was the founder of What Would an HIV Doula Do, started the morning out with a meme that was, oh, it's World AIDS Day, I get to think about AIDS today, but then, like, people living with AIDS actually get to think about that every day, right? And, you know, I don't, you know, I agree that it's complicated, but I don't think it's complicated to say that anti-blackness and leads to a lot of what we're talking about and is embedded into the fiber of all of this, right? And that the medical industrial complex system is actually meant to trap people inside of it so that they don't have a means of progressing out of it. I would argue that about the welfare system. I would argue about their housing systems. All of the things we have in place are actually meant to keep those folks who are experiencing those spaces in those spaces, right? Because that's where it's convenient for the white supremacist experiment to continue running. And so, you know, I think, yes, very much like, I was also, you know, I was on the radio today, and like it is a whole thing every December 1st where I have to, is the true me who is still mad about who's still mad about folks I buried going to show up today? Or is the compassionate me who's going to allow people to exist on their journey around this going to show up? And it is a vacillation between the two at any given moment. But yeah, the rage inside is actually what fuels much of my work. And Crystal has a bag that I actually designed for visual aids and is that you should check out. And because it says only our love and rage will save us, or something like this. I can't remember actually. It's been a couple of years. But what I mean in that work is that it's the component of both, right? The compassion, holding people, you inviting your friends and continuing to invite them even though they don't show up when they invite you to that bullshit that you didn't really want to go to anyway, but you have to show up. And your rage about that. And so you can carry it into the conversation. Remember that time I invited you to something I actually gave a shit about and you didn't show up? Sorry about the bombs. But you know, I think it is not one without the other. We're not going to just love our way into an existence where HIV doesn't exist. What has even gotten us to this point with medications and with the little rights that people have is people turning up into the streets and developing ways of making things not work when they're supposed to work and putting their bodies and selves in direct action against it. Yes.
The gentleman brought up about speaking about HIV. You know, you talk about the stigma. I personally would not want anybody to know I had HIV because of the way they would look at me. I feel they would look at me. So going out and talking about the other aspect of it that's really sad to me is it's forgotten. It wasn't on the Today Show. They don't talk about it. They're going to talk about the Christmas tree. They're going to talk about the Omicron. It's just completely forgotten, you know, and it's obviously not over.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think just shout out to all the people who are in this room tonight, right? And the idea of like, we at least get to carry this conversation and to carry our own candles, as it were, around HIV and AIDS, and like, you know, I think we're gonna see a video, right, in just a little bit that's gonna talk about this, and like, you know, it's the one particularly around folks aging with the virus who are just like, yeah, I get this as a reward for surviving. And what does that mean, right? These are folks who lived through the early years of AZT when it was, and has continued to ravish their actual whole existence. And so what does it mean to actually have survived? So, and not to forget.
One thing that I always try to remind myself is that the Ryan White Act, a lot of people think is like this universally, oh, we have the Ryan White Act. Oh, the Ryan White Act got reauthorized. Oh, that's great. I always try to remind myself, and I like to share this with people too, is that when the Ryan White Act was first passed, embedded within the act was the mandate that states criminalize intentional exposure to HIV. Now, they made it so that states had to criminalize intentional exposure, which I don't think that's right either, but that's a whole other conversation. And a whole lot of states took that and ran and criminalized actions that cannot transmit HIV, that we even knew then at the time when the Ryan White Act was passed, can't transmit HIV. And so there is incarceration embedded in the origins of the Ryan White Act, and there is, now I've never been a case manager, but I'm in community with a lot of folks who have been. Clients express that it feels like an extension of the parole system. Like it feels like an extension of probation. Clients are afraid, people living with HIV are afraid to be honest about their lives because they're afraid that their kids are going to get taken away from them. Because caseworkers are often mandated reporters. So incarceration and policing is built into so many of our HIV care systems. So Maurice, thank you for pushing.
Oh, no, I don't want to say it. Thank you.
I think we're at time, and we're going to see some. I encourage everybody to stay for the films. They're really brilliant. I want to thank our panelists.
Thanks for having
Oh,
us. Thank you.
Can I say something real quick? I haven't done this, and I know when I'm at a lot of these things, they don't do it either, but Lawrence, that man right there, I want to thank him for the work that he do. He's been doing this since I've been a teenager. I'm not trying to tell his age, but if it wasn't for Lawrence, we wouldn't have had those. So I talked about ballroom. If you know what the spot is, it's a little room. And we used that room. He let us use that room to Vogue and have little mini balls in that place. There's plenty of times where we could have just been out fighting, doing things like that. He fed so many people, and if it wasn't for him, a lot of people wouldn't be in the care today. So I want to give him his roses while he's right here, right now, sitting right here.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank to the panelists, and thank you to the CAM staff. Let's watch some movies.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We're going to give, once again, I just want to say thank you to our panelists here, and thank everybody in the room as well for their vulnerability, frustration, and insight into issues surrounding the ongoing HIV epidemic. We're going to give about a 5 to 10 minute break and take that time to stretch your feet, grab some refreshments if you'd like, hit one of the resource tables, and then as the lights begin to dim, we'll begin the film program. So thank you again for coming.